Rich men do not measure progress by applause, because applause is too unstable to govern a serious life. The poor man checks if people noticed. The ambitious but unsupported man checks if someone finally believes. The weak man checks because silence feels like rejection. But the strategic man measures what can survive inspection. Output, skill, proof, revenue, leverage. Control. Machiavelli was not interested in how men wished to be seen. He was interested in what actually preserves power. And one of his coldest observations was this: men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand. Most men hear that and think, so I need to look successful. No, the deeper lesson is more dangerous. If men judge by appearances, then their reactions are shallow by nature. Their praise is unstable. Their attention is corruptible. Their silence is not always judgment. Sometimes it is ignorance. The mistake is not using appearances. The mistake is letting appearances become your scoreboard. There is a hidden permission system controlling many ambitious men. It does not look like weakness, it looks productive. He posts, he checks, he refreshes, he waits. He studies the comments, he watches the views, he measures his worth by whether strangers reacted. And slowly, the crowd becomes a court. Every video becomes a trial. Every silence becomes a sentence. Every like becomes temporary proof that he exists. The question is not, do views matter? Of course they matter. The question is colder. When did feedback become validation? When did data become identity? And when did you start letting people who have built nothing decide whether your work counted? If you do not understand this, you will lose years. Not because you are lazy, because your motivation will be owned by reaction. You will create only when people clap. You will stop when they do not. You will confuse attention with progress. You will confuse praise with proof. You will confuse visibility with power. And this is how a man can become publicly active while privately dependent. He appears disciplined, but inside he is still asking permission. He says he is building, but emotionally he is still reporting to the crowd. Machiavelli would not call this discipline. He would call it dependence on forces outside your control. And in The Prince, he gives the foundation of the entire lesson. A wise prince must rely on what is in his power and not on what is in the power of others. Applause is in the power of others. Output is in yours. Views are in the power of others. Skill is in yours. Comments are in the power of others. Proof is in yours. A man who does not understand this will spend his life moving according to emotional weather. One week he is powerful because people noticed him. The next week he is doubtful because they went silent. One post makes him believe again. One ignored project makes him question everything. One compliment makes him feel chosen. One lack of response makes him feel invisible. That is not sovereignty. That is a nervous system rented out to the crowd. The validation trap begins when a man mistakes reaction for progress. Views, likes, comments, compliments, recognition, approval. These things are not meaningless, but they are not proof. They are signals. And signals can lie. A crowd can applaud weakness if weakness entertains them. A crowd can ignore strength if strength is still private. A crowd can reward timing, drama, novelty, trend, beauty, controversy, and noise before it rewards usefulness. So if you treat reaction as truth, you will eventually start shaping yourself for reaction instead of building what increases your position. That is where many ambitious men destroy themselves quietly. They do not quit in public, they quit in measurement. They keep working, but they start measuring the wrong things. They measure who liked the post. They measure who replied. They measure who noticed the progress photo. They measure whether the family member finally said something. They measure whether the old friend looked impressed. They measure whether strangers confirm that the path is real. But none of that proves the work is strong. It proves only that something was seen. Attention means someone looked. Proof means something can withstand inspection. A view is not proof. A compliment is not proof. A comment saying, "Great work," is not proof. Proof is a finished project. Proof is a skill demonstrated under pressure. Proof is a customer served. Proof is a problem solved. Proof is money earned without begging. Proof is a body of work that remains when the mood of the crowd disappears. This is the first law. Attention is not the same as proof. And until a man understands this, he will keep confusing emotional relief with progress. There is a study from UCLA published in Psychological Science where researchers simulated an Instagram-like environment. They found that teenagers were more likely to like photos that already had many likes. They also found that seeing many likes activated reward-related brain regions, including the nucleus accumbens. Do not reduce that lesson to teenagers. That is human nature under a bright screen. People are pulled by visible approval. They do not simply judge the thing. They judge the crowd around the thing. A man sees numbers and thinks he is seeing truth. He sees attention and thinks he is seeing value. He sees silence and thinks he is seeing rejection. But the crowd is not a pure judge. The crowd is influenced by what appears to be winning. Machiavelli understood this centuries before social media when he wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be, few really know what you are." The crowd sees the surface. The crowd sees the number. The crowd sees the appearance of momentum. But the crowd does not see the hours. It does not see the repetition. It does not see the skill forming. It does not see the private discipline that has not yet become public proof. This is why the unsupported man is in danger. He is building in the most fragile phase, the phase where effort is real, but evidence is still small. He may be changing, but the world still has old information. He may be improving, but his results have not become loud enough to force a new judgment. He may be closer than he thinks, but if he uses public reaction as his measurement system, silence will make him betray the work too early. The wheat man asks, "Did they notice?" The strategic man asks, "What did I build that still exists after they stop looking?" That question separates boys from builders. Because applause fades instantly, proof remains. Applause can flatter your ego without improving your position. Proof can improve your position even while nobody is clapping. This is why praise becomes addictive. Praise gives the unsupported man a temporary answer to a question he is ashamed to ask. Am I wasting my life? He does not only want compliments, he wants relief. He wants someone to say, "You are seen." He wants someone to say, "You are not delusional." He wants someone to say, "Your ambition is real." He wants someone to say, "You are not behind forever." That is why praise hits so deeply. It does not merely reward the work, it repairs the wound for a moment. But if he needs praise before continuing, his motivation no longer belongs to him. The more your motivation depends on applause, the less it belongs to you. And what does not belong to you can be taken from you. A crowd can give you energy today and starve you tomorrow. A platform can push you today and bury you tomorrow. A friend can praise you today and mock you tomorrow. A family member can doubt you for years, then act proud when the world finally approves. If your inner state follows their reaction, you are not sovereign. You are managed by noise. This is how men become trapped. They do not quit because the work is hard. They quit because the work is silent. They can handle effort. They can handle late nights. They can handle learning. They can handle pressure. But they cannot handle invisibility. so they start choosing work that gives quicker reaction instead of deeper power. They chase what gets noticed, not what builds leverage. They make decisions for the applause cycle instead of the power cycle. The applause cycle asks, what will make people react now? The power cycle asks, what will make my position stronger 6 months from now? The applause cycle creates emotional spikes. The power cycle creates accumulated advantage. The applause cycle makes you visible. The power cycle makes you harder to replace. A man who lives inside the applause cycle can look busy, energetic, and ambitious while still making weak strategic decisions. He announces plans because early praise feels like progress. He shares unfinished ideas because reaction feels like commitment. He checks metrics compulsively because each number gives him a small dose of certainty. He asks people who have no discipline to validate serious work because he wants emotional permission from familiar voices. And then he wonders why his momentum keeps dying. His discipline did not die, it was outsourced. Once discipline is outsourced, power is gone. This is why I want you to complete the circle audit inside the free membership after this video, not later, not when you feel inspired. Do it while the wound is exposed. Identify who you are secretly performing for. Identify where praise has replaced proof. Identify whose silence still changes your behavior. That is where the chain begins. Because most men are not performing for the public. They are performing for a private courtroom. You are probably not chasing approval from strangers. You are chasing it from someone specific. A father, a mother, a brother, an old friend, a critic, a woman who dismissed you, a room that treated you like you were nothing, a younger version of yourself that still wants proof he was not invisible. The question is not, do I want success? The question is, who do I want watching when it finally happens? That answer reveals the chain. If your ambition becomes a courtroom, every spectator becomes a judge. Then success is no longer strategy. It becomes emotional litigation. You are not simply building a business, body, channel, career, portfolio, skill, or reputation. You are trying to win a case against your past. That is dangerous. Because the people you are trying to impress may not be qualified to judge the life you are building. Family sees your past. Friends see your current rank. Critics see the version of you they already decided on. Strangers see the numbers. Very few people see the work before the proof. And some people benefit from your uncertainty, not always because they are evil, sometimes because your old identity makes them comfortable. Your doubt keeps the relationship familiar. Your dependence keeps the hierarchy stable. Your need to explain keeps them in the position of judge. Machiavelli knew that men are not stable evaluators. He wrote, "Men are ungrateful, fickle, false, cowardly, covetous." This is not a motivational statement. It is a warning about dependence. If men are fickle, their praise cannot become your foundation. If men are self-interested, their approval may follow advantage, not truth. If men judge by appearance, their early silence may mean nothing except that your proof has not become visible enough to affect their interests. This is why the unsupported man must be careful. He often wants approval from the exact people who are least capable of seeing him clearly. He thinks he wants success, but often he wants a witness. He wants someone to finally admit they were wrong. He wants the doubter to feel regret. He wants the family member to respect the path. He wants the old friend to see the result. He wants the world to confirm the identity he carried privately for years. But listen carefully. A man who needs applause is often not trying to improve the work. He is trying to prove he exists. That is why silence hurts him so deeply. It does not feel like data. It feels like erasure. But Machiavelli would force a harsher question. Why are you asking unstable people to stabilize your identity? You do not need a courtroom, you need a ledger. A courtroom asks, did they approve? A ledger asks, what was produced? A courtroom makes you emotional. A ledger makes you precise. A courtroom turns every viewer into a judge. A ledger turns every day into evidence. A courtroom keeps you begging for recognition. A ledger makes you dangerous in the only useful way, disciplined, measurable, and difficult to dismiss. This is where many men resist the lesson. They say they want freedom, but they still want the emotional drama of being discovered. They say they do not care what people think, but they monitor every sign that people may have changed their opinion. They say they are building for themselves, but one silent week makes them lose faith. That contradiction must end, not through numbness, not through pretending feedback does not matter. That is another childish extreme. A sovereign man uses feedback, he does not worship it. Views can inform you, comments can teach you, praise can signal something. Silence can reveal weakness in distribution, timing, positioning, promise, clarity, or proof. But none of it can replace output, skill, revenue, leverage, or control. Feedback improves the work. Validation protects the ego. Most men say they want feedback. What they secretly want is emotional confirmation. The difference is brutal. Feedback can hurt your pride and strengthen your position. Validation can comfort your pride and weaken your position. If a viewer says, "This is unclear," that is feedback. If a customer says, "The offer is weak," that is feedback. If the market refuses to buy, that is feedback. If the audience leaves early, that is feedback. If someone says, "You are amazing," and you use that to avoid improving, that is validation. If someone says, "I believe in you," and you use that as fuel for one day before collapsing again, that is validation. If someone finally notices your work, and suddenly you think your identity is safe, that is validation. Machiavelli warns against living in imagination instead of reality. How one lives is so far distant from how one ought to live, that he who neglects what is done for what ought to be done sooner effects his ruin than his preservation. Apply this to creation. You think the work ought to be praised because it cost you effort. But the world does not reward effort by itself. It rewards usefulness. It rewards clarity. It rewards trust. It rewards timing. It rewards proof. It rewards perceived value. So when a video fails, when an offer gets ignored, when a project receives no response, the weak man says, "They do not see me." The strategic man asks better questions. What was unclear? What proof was missing? What promise was weak? What skill failed under inspection? What did the market refuse to believe? That is feedback, not comfort, not applause. Correction. And correction is more valuable than praise, because praise often ends the conversation, while correction gives you the next move. A man who cannot separate feedback from validation will reject useful criticism and chase useless approval. He will call silence hatred. He will call correction negativity. He will call honest market response unfairness. And he will stay unproven because his ego keeps demanding protection. That is not power. That is fragility wearing the language of ambition. The real move is colder. Use the crowd as information, not as identity. Use metrics as instruments, not as permission. Use comments as signals, not as oxygen. Use applause as weather, not as law. The rich man does not reject praise. He simply refuses to be governed by it. He accepts applause as weather. He measures progress by construction. And once you understand that, the game changes. Because now the question is no longer, did they clap? The question becomes, did this increase my position? That is the question most men avoid because it cannot be answered with emotion. Position is the invisible scoreboard behind money, status, freedom, respect, and optionality. Most men measure how they feel. Strategic men measure what they control. Most men ask, do I feel motivated? Strategic men ask, did I create an asset? Most men ask, do people believe in me now? Strategic men ask, did I produce evidence that belief is becoming expensive to withhold? Most men ask, did the crowd respond? Strategic men ask, did my leverage increase? This is the difference between a man who wants to be witnessed and a man who wants to become undeniable. A man can post for years and never build an asset. A man can gain attention and never gain trust. A man can receive praise and never get paid. A man can be admired and still have no control over his time. A man can be visible and still weak. That is why visibility is not power. Being seen is not the same as being valuable. A man can be known and still broke. He can be praised and still dependent. He can have attention and still lack leverage. He can have followers and still have no offer, no proof, no skill that survives pressure, no system that produces when emotion disappears. Visibility says, people are watching. Power says, I have resources. Visibility says, they know my name. Power says, my position has improved. Visibility says, they reacted. Power says, I can act with less dependence. Machiavelli understood this through the language of rulers and states, but the principle applies to any man trying to build from weakness. He wrote in The Prince, "It is necessary to consider whether a prince has such power that, in case of need, he can support himself with his own resources, or whether he has always need of the assistance of others. Do not rush past that. Can you support yourself with your own resources? Not only financially, strategically. Can you move without emotional applause? Can you continue without public belief? Can you produce when the family does not understand? Can you improve when the friends do not share your work? Can you build when the algorithm ignores you? Can you sell when the first offers are rejected? Can you keep your standard when nobody is rewarding the standard yet? This is the test. Your own resources are not only money. They are skill, discipline, proof, savings, reputation, distribution, patience, body of work, network, judgment, and the ability to produce under pressure. If you always need others to lift you emotionally before you move, then you are not independent. You are waiting for psychological assistance. That is expensive, because the unsupported man often has no cushion, no inherited network, no powerful sponsor, no family machinery opening doors, no crowd waiting to save him, no automatic belief, no room full of people ready to interpret his silence as genius. He cannot afford emotional measurement. He must measure like a ruler: output, discipline, proof, leverage, control. This is why rich men, strategic men, serious men do not treat applause as the scoreboard. They may use applause as a signal. They may study it. They may extract intelligence from it. But they do not let it govern the direction of their life. Jeff Bezos made the opposite choice from the applause-addicted man in Amazon's 1997 shareholder letter. Amazon told shareholders it would measure itself by long-term market leadership indicators, including customer and revenue growth, repeat purchases, and brand strength. It also said it would measure investments analytically, discard what did not produce returns, and double down on what worked. That is the rich man's logic. He does not ask, are they clapping this quarter? He asks, are the foundations strengthening? Customer growth, repeat behavior, brand strength, capital velocity, infrastructure, long-term position. That is Machiavellian without theatrics. It is not emotional, it is structural. The weak man asks whether the crowd approves. The strategic man asks whether the machine is improving. The weak man asks whether he feels encouraged. The strategic man asks whether the system is producing evidence. The weak man treats silence as rejection. The strategic man treats silence as a period where proof is still being manufactured. Machiavelli wrote, "He who has relied least on fortune is established the strongest. Praise is fortune, views are fortune, timing is fortune, the algorithm is fortune, mood is fortune. A supportive comment is fortune, a viral push is fortune. A powerful person noticing you is fortune. You can benefit from fortune. You can prepare for fortune. You can position yourself so fortune has something to attach to when it arrives. But you cannot build your identity on fortune. Skill is less dependent on fortune. Output is less dependent on fortune. Systems are less dependent on fortune. Proof is less dependent on fortune. Discipline is less dependent on fortune. Your job is not to pretend fortune does not exist. That is foolish. Your job is to build what remains valuable when fortune leaves the room. That is why progress is what increases control, not what increases emotion. Measure output created. Measure skill improved. Measure proof accumulated. Measure offers tested. Measure offers tested. Measure customers served. Measure revenue produced. Measure systems built. Measure assets owned. Measure dependence reduced. Measure positions strengthened. That is progress, not applause, not a temporary mood, not a stranger's approval, not a family member finally softening, not a friend saying, "I always knew you could do it." Those things may feel good, but they are not the structure. The structure is what you can inspect. The rich mind asks, "What changed in my position after I executed?" And if the answer is nothing, then applause is just anesthesia. Attention without conversion is noise. Praise without proof is anesthesia. Activity without measurable output is disguised stagnation. This is the part most men do not want to hear. You can be busy and still not be progressing. You can post constantly and still not be building power. You can learn every day and still not be producing proof. You can consume wisdom and still remain strategically weak. You can talk about ambition for years and still be the same man with better vocabulary. That is why the internal scorecard matters. If you do not define success before the crowd reacts, the crowd will define it for you. And once the crowd defines success, your emotions become public property. This is why men become inconsistent. They do not always lack ambition. They lack a private measurement system. So every day becomes negotiable. If views are up, they work. If views are down, they doubt. If praise comes, they continue. If silence comes, they collapse into distraction. This is not strategy. This is emotional dependence with a work ethic. Before the day begins, define what counts. Did I publish? Did I keep the promise? Did I improve the skill? Did I create proof? Did I complete the project? Did I reduce dependence? Did I move the position forward? If yes, the day counted, even if nobody clapped. That is how you reclaim the scoreboard. Machiavelli's The Art of War is useful here only if we apply it carefully. He was writing about military order, not content creation, business, or personal growth. So do not distort him. The modern parallel is not violence, it is discipline under uncertainty. In an excerpt from The Art of War, Machiavelli writes, "Discipline in war counts more than fury." Translate that precisely. Discipline in creation counts more than emotional intensity. Fury posts once. Discipline publishes for a year. Fury checks comments. Discipline checks the work. Fury wants recognition. Discipline wants evidence. Fury burns hot when people clap. Discipline repeats when nobody cares. And this is the difference between men who have flashes and men who build empires. A flash is visible. An empire is accumulated. A flash creates attention. An empire creates dependence in the other direction. People begin to depend on your competence, your product, your insight, your system, your body of work, your reliability, your proof. That is how you become harder to dismiss, not by begging to be understood, not by explaining your potential, not by performing strength online while privately needing strangers to keep you alive emotionally. You become harder to dismiss by building evidence that survives inspection. This is where the internal scorecard becomes practical. You need 5 private metrics that cannot be hijacked by the mood of the crowd. Not vague goals, not identity slogans, not motivational declarations. Metrics: hours practiced, projects completed, videos published, proof assets created, offers sent, money saved, skills improved, customer problems solved, pages written, calls made, systems built. Do not choose metrics that merely make you feel productive. Choose metrics that expose whether you are building proof. A man who wants applause chooses metrics that are public and emotional. A man who wants power chooses metrics that are private, repeatable, and tied to position. This is why you should stop reporting unfinished plans to people who cannot help you build them. Early praise gives premature emotional reward. You tell people the goal, they react, you feel seen, and part of the hunger disappears before the work creates evidence. Then, you mistake the feeling of being supported for the reality of being prepared. That is a trap. Stop asking weak people to approve serious work. Stop asking people who have no proof to validate the path that requires proof. Stop asking the same room that doubted your ambition to become the fuel for your execution. They may understand later, they may not. Either way, your work cannot depend on their timing. This is why every man has a circle that controls him, not always physically, emotionally. The circle is made of people whose reaction still decides how real he feels. Until you name that circle, you will keep pretending you are independent while secretly performing for approval. You will announce unfinished plans because you want early praise. You will explain serious goals to unserious people. You will ask approval from people who have no evidence, no discipline, no leverage, and no authority to judge your future. You will confuse being understood with being ready. But being understood is not the same as being prepared. Being encouraged is not the same as being proven. Being praised is not the same as being positioned. Machiavelli wrote, "The vulgar are always taken by what a thing seems to be and by what comes of it." That is the crowd. They are moved by appearance and outcome, not by your private suffering, not by your invisible potential, not by your explanation. This is why over-explaining is weak. You are trying to make people respect a result before it exists. You are asking them to honor a future they cannot inspect. Do not be shocked when they refuse. The crowd often updates after evidence, not before. That may feel unfair, but it is strategically useful. It tells you what to build. Do not ask them to believe. Build the proof that makes disbelief more expensive. This is the circle audit. First, identify who you are secretly performing for. Name them. Do not be poetic, be exact. Whose silence bothers you more than it should? Whose approval would make you feel like the path is finally real? Whose doubt still makes you explain yourself? Whose imagined reaction appears in your mind when you think about success? That person or that group is part of the circle. Second, identify where praise has replaced proof. Where are you collecting compliments instead of building evidence? Where are you using reaction to avoid measurement? Where do you feel productive because people responded, even though nothing structural improved? Where have you confused being noticed with becoming valuable? Third, separate signal from identity. Views are data, comments are data, praise is data, silence is data, criticism is data. None of it is your identity. A low view count is not your identity. A strong comment is not your identity. A rejected offer is not your identity. A silent family member is not your identity. A friend failing to understand you is not your identity. These things may contain information, but they cannot be allowed to define the man. Fourth, create 5 internal metrics: hours practiced, projects completed, videos published, proof assets created, offers sent, money saved, skills improved. Pick 5, track them weekly, review them coldly, do not negotiate with them emotionally. Fifth, set one 30-day proof target. Not 10 goals, 1 proof target. Publish 4 videos. Build 3 portfolio samples. Send 100 serious offers. Complete 1 case study. Finish 1 abandoned project. Save a specific amount of money. Document 1 skill transformation. Build 1 public proof asset. The target must be visible enough to inspect and specific enough to finish. Sixth, reduce validation exposure. Stop checking metrics compulsively. Stop reporting unfinished plans. Stop asking weak people to approve serious work. Stop refreshing the crowd every time your discipline feels uncertain. Review performance only at scheduled times. Use data like an operator, not like an addict. And remember this rule: do not let the crowd decide whether the day counted. The day counted if you created evidence. The day counted if you improved the system. The day counted if you reduced dependence. The day counted if you moved the position forward, even if nobody clapped, especially if nobody clapped, because that is where self-command is built, not when the crowd is cheering, but when silence no longer governs you. This is the final difference between applause and power. Applause is granted. Proof is built. Applause is unstable. Proof accumulates. Applause can disappear. Proof can be inspected. Applause makes you feel seen. Proof makes you harder to ignore. Machiavelli does not teach you to be liked. He teaches you to understand what liking is worth. Sometimes liking is useful. Sometimes it is theater. Sometimes it is a mask for self-interest. Sometimes it disappears when necessity arrives. That is why he wrote, "It is much safer to be feared than loved, when of the two either must be dispensed with." Do not apply this foolishly. This does not mean threaten people. This does not mean act cruelly. This does not mean become a cartoon of power. In modern life, understand it more carefully. Approval is unstable because it depends on the will of others. Respect becomes stronger when it is backed by consequence. The consequence of your competence. The consequence of your proof. The consequence of your leverage. The consequence of your ability to walk away. The consequence of becoming too valuable to casually dismiss. You cannot control whether people approve, but you can control whether your evidence becomes difficult to deny. That is the difference between applause and power. A man governed by applause can be stopped by silence. A man governed by proof keeps building until silence becomes impossible. You do not need applause to know whether you are becoming stronger. You need evidence. Views may rise, views may fall. Praise may come, praise may disappear. Comments may flatter you, silence may test you. None of that changes the work. Measure output, measure discipline, measure proof, measure leverage, measure control. Stop asking the crowd to confirm what your execution should already know. This is not emotional numbness. This is not pretending you do not care. This is not rejecting all feedback. This is control over what governs you. The strategic man still listens, but he listens for signal. He does not listen for permission. He does not let the crowd decide if the work was worth doing. He does not let applause become his master. He builds the ledger. He builds the proof. He builds the body of work. He builds the skill. He builds the reputation. He builds the offer. He builds the offer. He builds the asset. He builds the system. He builds until the evidence speaks without begging. Complete. The circle audit inside the free membership. Identify who you are secretly performing for. Identify whose approval still controls your emotions. Identify where praise has replaced proof. Then continue with unsupported to undeniable. Build discipline, build skill, build proof, build leverage, build income, build independence. Do not wait to feel seen. Build until the evidence speaks without begging. And understand the deeper problem waiting beyond this one. Once you stop needing applause, you will meet the next test. Can you keep building when proof starts arriving, when people finally notice, when the same crowd that once ignored you begins to reward you? Because many men escape silence only to become addicted to recognition again. They survive being unseen, then collapse under being watched. That is why the work is not merely to get attention. The work is to become the kind of man attention cannot corrupt. No applause, no permission, no courtroom, only evidence.